Every single one of us dreams a nightly voyage into a world of our own making, but in ancient Egypt, they believed these journeys were far more than just imagination. They saw dreams as urgent messages, direct lines to the gods, and even prophetic visions of the future. They recorded these bizarre nightly episodes with meticulous care, creating a strange and wonderful archive of the subconscious that we are only just beginning to understand. By the end of this, you will know the secret language of Egyptian dreams, from royal prophecies that changed history to the commoner's deepest fears etched onto papyrus. We will uncover why a dream of a cat could mean a bountiful harvest, while a dream of your own tooth falling out was a terrifying omen. What do you believe your own dreams are truly trying to tell you? To truly grasp their dream records, we must first step into their world, a place where a person was not just a single being, but a constellation of interconnected spirits. The ancient Egyptians believed the soul had multiple parts, each with a vital role in life and the afterlife. The most crucial for our story are the ka, the ba, and the akh. Think of the ka as your life force, your vital double. It was born with you, and it needed sustenance even after death, which is why tombs were filled with food offerings. Then there was the ba, often shown as a human-headed bird. This was your personality, everything that made you you. It could travel after death, moving between the tomb and the outside world. Finally, the akh was the transformed, effective spirit of the deceased, a shining being that had successfully reached the afterlife. So, where do dreams fit into this intricate spiritual map? The Egyptians saw the dream state as the perfect moment when these parts of the soul could slip their earthly bonds. Your ba, that bird-like essence of yourself, could fly free from your sleeping body. It could journey to the realm of the gods, or it could receive visitors from that divine world. A dream was not a random firing of neurons, it was a real journey, a genuine message. When a pharaoh dreamed of a god promising victory, it was not a metaphor. His ba had communed with a deity. When a farmer dreamed of a dying ox, it was an omen, a warning sent directly to his receptive spirit. This belief that the soul was active and traveling while the body slept made every dream significant. It transformed a bizarre nighttime vision into a sacred text, waiting for a priest to decipher its divine code. This nightly journey of the soul made every dream a potential message from the divine. For the ancient Egyptians, the gods were not distant, abstract beings. They were active participants in the world, and dreams were one of their favorite ways to speak. A dream was a direct, unedited broadcast from the heavens, a sacred conversation between a mortal's wandering spirit and a deity. But who was on the other end of the line? Several gods were particularly known for their connection to the dream world. The most prominent was Serapis, a powerful god of healing who often delivered diagnoses and cures through dreams in his temples. But the true master of this realm was Bes, a god who looked nothing like the majestic, idealized figures of Osiris or Ra. Bes was a dwarf, a comical figure with a lion's mane and a protruding tongue, often shown dancing or playing a harp. Despite his bizarre appearance, he was a beloved protector of the household, especially of mothers and children. He stood guard against nightmares and evil spirits, his fierce visage scaring away dangers in the dark. When you drifted to sleep, it was Bes who watched over your journeying ba, and then there was Thoth, the god of wisdom and writing, the ultimate scribe. If a dream was a message, then Thoth provided the language, the logic, and the symbols needed to understand it, but receiving a divine message was only the first step. Understanding its true meaning was a science, one that required a specialized interpreter. This is where the priests came in. They were not just religious figures, they were the ancient world's most sought-after therapists and cryptographers. When a person had a powerful or troubling dream, they would often seek out a priest, sometimes at a special temple known as an incubation chamber. Here, a seeker would perform rituals, make offerings, and sleep in a sacred space, hoping for a clarifying dream or a priest's interpretation. The priest would then listen carefully to the dream narrative. He did not rely on intuition alone. He consulted vast dream books, long papyrus scrolls that acted as divine decoders. These books were not about personal psychology. They were based on a system of opposites and parallels. For example, dreaming of a deep well might mean you were about to be imprisoned. Seeing a large cat could predict a bountiful harvest from the Nile. The priest's job was to cross-reference the dream symbols with this sacred text, translating the god's cryptic imagery into practical advice for health, love, business, or survival. A single bizarre dream could dictate the entire course of a person's next week or even their life. While the priests held the sacred knowledge, their interpretations were not based on mere guesswork. They consulted a precise manual for the subconscious, a text known today as the Chester Beatty Papyrus III. This ancient scroll, dating back over 3,000 years, is one of the world's oldest surviving dream books. It was not a casual journal but a formal, systematic guide, a tool for navigating the messages received by the traveling soul. The papyrus is structured with meticulous clarity, divided into two main columns. On the right, you have the dream itself, the raw vision. On the left, you find its definitive interpretation, labeled simply as good or bad. This was a binary system of fate, a direct translation from the god's cryptic language into a clear forecast for the dreamer's waking life. The keeper of this powerful knowledge was a figure known as the Master of the Secret Things. This was not just a priest, but a highly specialized scholar, a true expert in oneiromancy, the art of dream divination. He was the only person trusted to accurately decode the divine warnings and promises found within a person's sleep. Imagine bringing him a troubling dream. He would unroll the papyrus, his eyes scanning the entries, searching for a match to your vision. The logic within the dream book often followed a fascinating principle of opposites and parallels. For example, if you dreamed of fetching water from a river in a large jar, that was a very good omen. It meant you would receive a great bounty from a god. But if you dreamed of drawing water with a leaky vessel, that was catastrophically bad, foretelling the death of all your family members. The dream book was not merely a tool for passive prediction. It was a guide for active intervention. If the Master of the Secret Things decoded a bad omen, he would prescribe specific rituals, prayers, or offerings to appease the angry god or ward off the coming misfortune. This manual was a practical device for shaping your own destiny, giving you a chance to change the future the gods had revealed. So, what did a good future look like in the language of Egyptian dreams? The Chester Beatty Papyrus paints a vivid picture of hope and divine favor. Dreaming of drinking wine, for instance, was a powerful promise of a long and healthy life. This was not merely about the pleasure of the drink. Wine was a symbol of lifeblood, of joy, and of offerings to the gods themselves. To consume it in a dream was to absorb its vital essence, a direct gift from the deities guaranteeing your vitality. Another wonderfully specific good omen was dreaming of a large cat. This did not just predict a good day for your household pet. A large cat signified a bountiful inundation of the Nile River. The connection is beautifully logical. Cats protected the massive grain stores from rodents, and a plentiful harvest depended entirely on the Nile's annual flood. Therefore, the cat in your dream was not just an animal, it was a living symbol of prosperity, a divine promise that the river would rise, the fields would be fertile, and the people would be fed. The dream book also reveals that seeing your own face in a mirror was an exceptionally fortunate vision. It meant you would acquire a new family, often interpreted as the birth of a child or a second wife. ensuring your legacy would continue. Even something as simple as dreaming of eating a hot fig was a sign of great news arriving, the heat of the fruit representing the urgency and warmth of the impending message. These positive symbols were deeply woven into the fabric of daily Egyptian life, turning ordinary objects into vessels of divine promise. They were not random guesses, but a coded language where the gods used the most familiar elements of a person's world to announce protection, abundance, and joy. But for every promise of a good harvest, the dream books held far darker warnings. A single nightmare could unravel a life, foretelling sickness, betrayal, and even death. The Chester Beatty Papyrus treats these bad omens with the same stark clarity as the good. Dreaming of your own bed catching fire, for instance, was not a strange image to dismiss upon waking. It was a direct and terrifying prophecy of a severe illness coming to you or your family. The bed, a place of rest and safety, consumed by flames, represented the body itself being attacked by fever and disease. Even more disturbing was the omen of dreaming you were having sex with a crocodile. This bizarre and frightening vision had a very specific, worldly meaning. It signified a brutal betrayal by the officials you were supposed to trust. The crocodile, a creature of deadly deception lurking just beneath the water's surface, perfectly symbolized the hidden treachery of those in power. Other bad dreams were equally vivid. To see your own face in a mirror, which we just learned could be a good omen of a new family, could also be interpreted as bad if the reflection was distorted, predicting your own death. Dreaming of a deep well meant you were about to be imprisoned, trapped in a dark, inescapable place, and perhaps one of the most universal nightmares, dreaming that your teeth were falling out, was recorded in ancient Egypt as a catastrophically bad sign, foretelling the death of your own relatives by violence. These were not abstract fears, they were precise diagnoses of impending doom delivered directly to your soul while it wandered, yet this terrifying knowledge came with a chance for salvation. The priests did not simply deliver a fatalistic verdict. Upon interpreting a bad omen, the master of the secret things would prescribe a series of rituals to actively avert the disaster. If you dreamed of that bed on fire, you might be instructed to make a specific offering to the goddess Sekhmet, the fierce deity of plague and healing, to soothe her wrath. To counter the crocodile's betrayal, you might need to create a small protective amulet or recite spells to bind the tongues of dishonest officials. These rituals transformed passive fear into empowered action. The dream was a warning shot, and the prescribed rites were your shield, giving you a fighting chance to change the fate the gods had revealed. The most famous royal dream in history was not recorded on an Egyptian papyrus, but in the Hebrew Bible. It is the story of a pharaoh tormented by a vision, a dream so vivid and unsettling that it threatened the stability of his entire kingdom. He dreamed of 7 fat, healthy cows emerging from the Nile River, only to be devoured by 7 gaunt, ugly cows that came up after them. Then he dreamed again, this time of 7 plump, full heads of grain being swallowed up by 7 thin, blighted heads. The pharaoh awoke deeply troubled, his spirit agitated. This was not a personal nightmare about a tooth falling out or a bed on fire. This was a state emergency delivered directly to the king's soul. His royal ba had received a message of national importance, and he needed the master of the secret things to decode it. The biblical account tells us that all the magicians and wise men of Egypt could not provide the interpretation. It took an outsider, the Hebrew interpreter Joseph, to unlock the divine code. He explained that the 2 dreams were one and the same message from God. The 7 good cows and the 7 good heads of grain represented 7 years of incredible agricultural abundance in Egypt. The 7 lean cows and the 7 blighted heads represented 7 years of severe famine that would follow and consume all the surplus. The symbolism was deeply rooted in the Egyptian world. The Nile was the lifeblood of the nation, and its annual inundation dictated every harvest. Cows were symbols of fertility and power, while grain was the foundation of the economy. For a priest trained in the dream books, the logic of one symbol representing its opposite, abundance predicting famine, would have been a familiar, though terrifying, concept. The pharaoh's dream was a perfect, chilling example of the Egyptian belief system in action, a divine forecast delivered to the highest authority in the land. But the story did not end with the interpretation. The pharaoh, convinced by Joseph's explanation, took immediate and massive action. He appointed Joseph to oversee a national program of grain storage, collecting a fifth of all the produce during the 7 plentiful years. This was a direct result of a dream, a prophetic vision that reshaped state policy and saved a kingdom from collapse. It shows us that for the Egyptians, a royal dream was not a private affair, it was a matter of national security, a tool of governance handed down from the gods themselves. The story of the pharaoh and his cows is legendary, but it was not the only royal dream to shape the course of Egyptian history. Centuries later, a young prince named Thutmose faced a very different kind of crisis, one that he would solve not with grain stores, but with a dream carved in stone. He was not the primary heir to the throne, a younger son in a royal family with a clear line of succession. The great Sphinx at Giza, that colossal lion with a human head, was not the tourist attraction we know today. It was ancient even then, a relic from a forgotten age, nearly buried to its neck in the relentless sands of the desert. To the Egyptians, it was not a silent statue, but a powerful god known as Harmakhis, a form of the sun god himself. One day, while hunting in the desert heat, the Prince Thutmose decided to rest in the shadow of the immense, half-buried head. He fell asleep, and in that sacred space, his traveling ba received a message that would change everything. The god Harmakhis spoke to him directly from the stone. The god complained that he was choked and trapped by the desert, his divine body imprisoned by the sand. He then made the young prince an astonishing offer. If Thutmose would clear the sand and restore the Sphinx to its former glory, the god would guarantee him the throne of Egypt. This was not a vague promise, it was a direct contract between a god and a mortal. Thutmose awoke and immediately set to work, organizing crews to excavate the massive sculpture, freeing the god from his sandy prison. He later erected a large stone slab between the Sphinx's paws, known today as the Dream Stela, which tells this entire story. But why carve such a detailed account for all to see? Thutmose was not the crown prince. His claim to the throne was weak, and he needed a powerful justification for his rule that no noble or rival could question. The dream was his divine endorsement, a public relations masterpiece written by the gods themselves. By proclaiming that the sun god had personally chosen him in exchange for a pious act, Thutmose IV legitimized his entire reign. He transformed a potential power grab into a sacred duty, proving that in ancient Egypt, a single dream could be more powerful than an army. For those suffering from an illness that no earthly doctor could cure, the temples offered a final divine resort. This practice was known as incubation, a deliberate pilgrimage to sleep within the sacred walls of a healing temple. People traveled from across the land to sanctuaries dedicated to gods like Serapis or the deified architect and healer, Imhotep. They came seeking a direct consultation with a deity in their dreams, a supernatural diagnosis and prescription that could not be found anywhere else. The process was far from simple. A seeker would first undergo a period of purification, bathing in sacred waters and adhering to a strict diet. They would make offerings of food, incense, or small statues to the temple priests, gifts meant to gain the god's favor and attention. Only then, after these careful preparations, would they be led into the abaton, the innermost and most restricted part of the temple. This was not a comfortable bedchamber. It was often a darkened hall or a portico lined with stone slabs, where they would lie down to sleep among other hopeful patients, the air thick with the scent of incense and the weight of collective prayer. In this heightened state of ritual purity and anticipation, they would close their eyes and wait for their ba to be visited. The goal was a therapeutic dream, a vision in which the god himself would appear. The inscriptions left behind on the temple walls give us incredible case studies of these divine encounters. One man, blind in one eye, dreamed that the god came to him, opened his eyelid, and poured a powerful medicine directly into it. He awoke with his sight fully restored. Another, suffering from a parasitic worm, was instructed in his dream to sleep on the temple floor with his mouth open. The god, in the form of a sacred snake, emerged from its hole and licked the afflicted area, curing him completely. These were not mere stories of faith, they were documented medical miracles. The god might appear and perform a symbolic surgery, or simply prescribe a specific remedy, a herb to be gathered or a poultice to be applied. The priests acted as the follow-up care, interpreting the often symbolic dream treatments and ensuring the patient carried out the divine instructions to the letter. This was a complete medical system, one that blended spirituality, psychology, and a deep belief in the power of the traveling soul to bring back a cure from the very realm of the gods. While pharaohs dreamed of national famines and divine endorsements, the common Egyptian was visited by visions of a much more personal world. Their dream records reveal a landscape of anxiety centered on the fragile pillars of their existence: health for the day's labor, a bountiful harvest to ward off hunger, the safety of their family, and their precarious standing in a rigid society. The gods spoke to them not in grand symbols of state, but in the intimate language of their own fields, homes, and bodies. A dream was a mirror held up to their deepest fears and most fervent hopes. Imagine a farmer, his life tethered to the muddy banks of the Nile. He does not dream of 7 cows, but of a single, precious ox. In his vision, the animal that pulls his plow and threshes his grain suddenly collapses and dies. Waking in a cold sweat, he would rush to a local priest, his heart pounding. Consulting the dream book, the priest would deliver a grim prognosis. This was not merely a prediction of the ox's death. It was an omen of the farmer's own impending illness, a sickness that would render him as weak and useless as his dead animal, threatening his family's survival. The dream was a direct warning to prepare, to make offerings, to beg the gods for mercy. For a merchant, a dream of his own teeth falling out was not a strange physiological event. It was a horrifying prophecy of his relatives dying by violence. His mind, shaped by the constant threat of bandits or local disputes, translated that universal anxiety into a specific, divine message about the safety of his kin. These records show us that the common person's greatest fear was the collapse of their microcosm, the small, fragile world they had built. Their good dreams were equally telling. A vision of a large cat was not about a pet, but a promise of a high Nile inundation, meaning full granaries and full bellies. Dreaming of seeing his own face clearly in a mirror could mean the birth of a son, an assurance that his name and his labor would continue into the next generation. For a woman, a dream of carrying a heavy load might predict a long-desired pregnancy, the weight a symbol of the child she would carry. These were not abstract symbols. They were the core components of a life spent in relentless effort. The dreams of ordinary Egyptians give us something royal inscriptions often ignore: the raw, unfiltered voice of human worry and aspiration. They remind us that while kings used dreams to build legacies in stone, their subjects used them to simply survive another year. To become a master interpreter of dreams was to undertake one of the most demanding intellectual journeys in ancient Egypt. These priests were not merely religious figures, They were the state's ultimate experts in symbolic language, trained for years in the complex arts of reading, writing, and theology. Their minds were vast libraries of myth, ritual, and the official dream books, allowing them to connect a person's bizarre nighttime vision to a vast cosmic order. Their primary tool was the dream manual itself, a sacred scroll like the Chester Beatty Papyrus, but this was just the starting point. A truly skilled interpreter knew that the same symbol could shift meaning based on the dreamer's social status, the current season, or even an omen seen in the sky the day before. They wielded a fluid, living science of the subconscious. This gave them immense influence, and their interpretations carried the weight of divine law. In a legal dispute over property, a judge might delay his verdict until a priest could interpret a plaintiff's dream, seeking a sign from the gods on who held the rightful claim. In medicine, a doctor would often work in tandem with a dream priest. If an illness baffled the physician's knowledge of herbs and bandages, the patient would be sent to a temple for an incubation sleep. The resulting dream, interpreted by the priest, would provide the divine diagnosis, telling the doctor which remedy to apply or which god to appease. On a personal level, their word could decide a marriage, halt a business venture, or send a family into days of ritual cleansing. They were the bridge between the confusing messages of the soul and the clear, actionable demands of daily life. To question their interpretation was to question the gods themselves, placing these masters of secret things at the very heart of ancient Egyptian society, from the royal court to the humblest village. This sacred art of interpretation was only half the story. A decoded dream, especially a bad omen, was a call to action, and the response was often a direct application of magic. The line between understanding a divine message and actively manipulating your fate was incredibly thin, and it was crossed with spells, amulets, and potent rituals. The dream books themselves were not just lists of meanings, they were practical manuals for survival. When a priest interpreted your nightmare of a dying ox as a prediction of your own sickness, he would not send you home to worry. He would prescribe a specific counterspell, a magical procedure to deflect the impending illness. These rituals were meticulously detailed in magical papyri, handbooks of supernatural power that every master of secret things would have consulted. Imagine a woman who dreamed of her bed engulfed in flames, a sure omen of fever. To avert this, she might be instructed to create a small amulet. She would inscribe a piece of linen with a protective spell, perhaps invoking the dwarf god Bes to scare away the sickness, then tie it around her neck before sleeping. The magic was in the action, the physical creation of a shield against the future revealed in her dream. For a man who dreamed of the treacherous crocodile, foretelling betrayal, the prescribed magic might involve a binding ritual. He would write the names of his suspected enemies on a pottery shard, then smash it in a ceremonial act, symbolically breaking their power over him. This was not superstition, it was a logical and empowered response. The dream provided the intelligence report of a coming attack, and the magical ritual was the strategic defense. It gave people a sense of control in a world ruled by unpredictable gods and fates. The dream and the spell were two halves of a single conversation with the divine, a continuous loop of receiving a message and then using sacred power to write a different ending. The language of dreams also whispered secrets of the human heart. In matters of love and romance, the ancient Egyptians turned to their dream books with a special kind of urgency. A dream could reveal the intentions of a potential suitor, predict the stability of a marriage, or answer the most profound longing for a child. The symbols were intimate and deeply telling. For a young woman, dreaming of eating a sweet pomegranate was a powerful omen that a new, passionate love was entering her life. The sweet, seedy fruit was a classic symbol of desire and the promise of a fruitful union. But if she dreamed of a withered lotus flower, the interpretation was grim, foretelling a betrayal or the cooling of her partner's affections. The lotus, a flower that closes at night and reopens with the sun, was a perfect symbol for a love that had failed to bloom again. For a married man, a dream of his own house collapsing was not about literal architecture. It was a divine warning of his marriage falling into ruin, a sign to mend the rift with his wife before it was too late. The home was the foundation of his social world, and its collapse in a dream mirrored the potential destruction of his family life. The most powerful dreams of all were those concerning fertility. For a culture that lived by the fertile cycles of the Nile, the ability to have children was paramount. A woman hoping for a child might dream of carrying a heavy bundle of reeds. To the priest, this was not a burden, but a joyful prediction of pregnancy, the weight symbolizing the child she would soon carry. Dreaming of seeing a clear, full moon reflected in water was another potent sign of impending motherhood, connecting her to the lunar cycles that governed both the Nile's tides and a woman's body. But when dreams failed to bring answers, or when a person wanted to direct their dreams toward a specific goal, they turned to magic. There were specific love spells designed to inspire a dream sendings. A person might inscribe the name of their beloved on a small clay figure, then place it under their own pillow before sleep, reciting an incantation to compel their ba to seek out the other person's spirit and deliver a message of love. Others would sleep with a charm made of specific herbs tied in a linen pouch, hoping to receive a prophetic vision of their future spouse. This was dream manipulation, an active attempt to use the soul's nocturnal journey not just for divination, but for creation, shaping the landscape of the heart one vision at a time. The blueprint for a temple did not always begin with papyrus and ink, but sometimes within the sacred space of a dream. We have seen how dreams guided personal decisions and royal politics, but they also reached into the very stone and mortar of Egypt's most enduring monuments. There are compelling claims that specific architectural wonders were born not from human design alone, but from divine visions granted to architects or their royal patrons. This is where spiritual revelation merged with physical creation. The most famous example involves the magnificent temple of Hatshepsut at Deir el-Bahri. Its unique, sweeping terraces and colonnades, carved directly into the face of a towering cliff, feel otherworldly. According to some interpretations of the inscriptions, the design was directly inspired by a vision. The female pharaoh Hatshepsut, or her master architect Senenmut, is said to have received a dream from the goddess Hathor herself, revealing the temple's layout as a perfect reflection of her divine mountain home. The resulting structure is not just a building, it is a dreamscape made real, a place where heaven and earth meet in harmonious tiers. Another powerful idea is that the labyrinthine passages and hidden chambers within pyramids were not just practical defenses against tomb robbers. Their disorienting, dark complexity may have been intentionally designed to mirror the confusing and perilous journey of the soul through the Juat, the Egyptian underworld, a journey first glimpsed in the symbolic dreams of priests and kings. The architect, acting as a master of the secret things for stone, would translate these spiritual maps into physical corridors. Even the placement of a single statue could be dictated by a nocturnal message. A nobleman might dream that the god Ptah appeared and demanded a statue be placed facing the rising sun in a specific courtyard. Upon waking, he would command his builders to fulfill this divine instruction, altering the sacred geometry of his tomb complex forever. This practice transformed architecture from a mere craft into a form of active prayer. Every pillar, every chamber, and every aligned corridor could be a direct response to a conversation held in the realm of dreams, making the entire landscape of Egypt a permanent record of its people's sleeping dialogues with the gods. The legend of Nectanebo II carries a different kind of weight, the heavy burden of an ending. He was the last native pharaoh to ever rule Egypt, a final flicker of a flame before an empire was extinguished. In the twilight of his reign, as the vast Persian army gathered at the borders, a story emerged that would come to define his fall. It was said that the pharaoh was visited by a dream of profound and terrifying clarity. He saw the powerful god Oniris, a divine hunter and warrior, turning his back on his own temple. The deity did not simply vanish. He carefully gathered his sacred furnishings, his statues, and his weapons, packing them as if for a long journey. Then, abandoning the sanctuary built in his honor, the god walked slowly away, disappearing into the horizon. Nectanebo awoke chilled to his core. He immediately summoned his own masters of the secret things, demanding an interpretation of this devastating vision. The priests, consulting their knowledge and the sacred texts, delivered a verdict that was as simple as it was fatal. The dream was not a warning, it was a conclusion. Oniris, a god of strength and protection, was evacuating his post. He was withdrawing his divine favor from Egypt itself, leaving the kingdom spiritually defenseless. This was the ultimate nightmare for a pharaoh whose primary role was to maintain Ma'at, the sacred order of the universe, and keep the gods content. A god leaving his temple meant the cosmic contract was broken. The prophecy was undeniable. The Persian invasion would succeed. History tells us that Nectanebo II fled Egypt rather than face the final battle, and the country fell to Persian rule. Whether the dream was a genuine divine message or a story crafted later to explain a national tragedy, it encapsulates the Egyptian belief in its most absolute form. A dream did not just predict events, it revealed the movements of the gods themselves, and when a god chose to walk away, even a pharaoh was powerless to stop him. An animal appearing in your dream was never just an animal, it was a living symbol, a vessel for the power and personality of a god. The ancient Egyptians lived in a world shared intimately with the divine, and the creatures of the Nile and desert were the primary characters in their symbolic language. To understand a dream about a falcon was to understand the god Horus, the divine king of the sky. A vision of this majestic bird, especially one soaring high above, was one of the most positive omens a person could receive. It represented the favor of Horus himself, a promise of royal protection, clear vision over your problems, and ultimate victory over your enemies. The falcon's ability to see everything from a great height mirrored the perspective the gods could offer you in your waking life, lifting you above confusion and conflict. This connection was so strong that to dream of a falcon was to feel the presence of the celestial order, a guarantee that Ma'at, or divine balance, was on your side. Yet the same river that offered life could also bring terror, embodied in the form of the hippopotamus. On the surface, this creature might seem like a simple, bulky herbivore. But in the Egyptian mind, and therefore in their dreams, the hippo was a monster of pure chaos. It was linked to the god Seth, the violent deity of storms, disorder, and everything that opposed the harmony of Ma'at. Hippos were known to capsize boats without warning, trample riverside crops, and exhibit a raw, destructive power that could shatter a family's livelihood in an instant. Therefore, dreaming of a hippopotamus was a profoundly negative omen. It did not just predict a bad day, it foretold an incoming storm of chaos in your life. It could mean you were about to be overwhelmed by forces beyond your control, that a business venture would be sunk by unseen turmoil, or that a personal conflict would erupt into violent disorder. The hippo was the antithesis of the soaring falcon, a symbol of being dragged down into the muddy, unpredictable depths. This symbolic system extended to nearly every creature in their environment. Dreaming of a scarab beetle, for instance, was an astonishingly good sign. The scarab, or dung beetle, was the living form of the god Khepri, who rolled the sun across the sky each day just as the beetle rolled its ball of dung. To see one in your dream was a powerful promise of transformation, rebirth, and the successful completion of a major cycle in your life. It meant that just as the sun is reborn at dawn, you were on the verge of a personal renewal. Even the humble cat, a protector of the home and granaries, carried the fierce grace of the goddess Bastet. A dream of a large, healthy cat was a direct blessing from Bastet, predicting prosperity and safety for your entire household. Conversely, a dream of a dead or injured cat was a severe warning that your domestic security was about to be violated. The logic was consistent and deeply rooted in their worldview. Each animal was a key that unlocked a specific divine force, and the dream was the moment that key was handed to you, offering a glimpse into which gods were moving in your life, for better or for worse. The dream books did not shy away from the body's most private and unsettling functions. Where we might see random, chaotic images, the Egyptian priest saw a precise spiritual diagnosis. Take the simple, almost universal act of urination. In the Chester Beatty Papyrus, if a man dreamed of urinating against a wall, the interpretation was starkly negative. It meant his own wife was being unfaithful to him. The logic was one of waste and misdirection. The vital fluid of life was being spent on a solid, unyielding surface, symbolizing a wife's affections being poured out on someone other than her husband. This was not about shame, but about the disastrous misdirection of a household's vital energy, a direct threat to its stability. Even more visceral was the omen of dreaming about drinking one's own blood. This shocking act was paradoxically a very good sign, foretelling that the dreamer would receive property and wealth from his own relatives. The blood, the very essence of family lineage, was being internally recycled, symbolizing an inheritance coming directly to him, keeping the family's wealth within its own lifeblood. The symbolism of decay and transformation was equally direct. To dream of a rotting leg of meat was a catastrophic prediction of your mother's death. The limb, a source of support and movement, decaying and becoming useless, mirrored the collapse of the foundational support a mother provided. Conversely, dreaming of your own body transforming, of your skin turning into gold, was a promise of immense honor from the gods, a spiritual purity that would shine for eternity. These bizarre and graphic symbols were a language of essence. Bodily fluids represented life force and social bonds. Decay represented the breakdown of those bonds. The priests were not interpreting the literal image, but the core spiritual principle it revealed. A dream of feces, for instance, was often linked to money, as waste was the byproduct of consumption, the leftover from what had been nourishing. So to dream of stepping in it could mean stumbling into unexpected wealth, while dreaming of being covered in it might predict a public humiliation related to finances. Every function, no matter how strange, was a piece of a divine code, mapping the invisible currents of health, status, and spiritual standing onto the raw, unfiltered landscape of the sleeping mind. A dream of your own death was not necessarily a terrifying omen of physical end. In the Egyptian mind, it could be a profound rehearsal for the soul's ultimate test. The most critical moment in the afterlife was the weighing of the heart ceremony, a scene depicted in countless tomb paintings and described in the Book of the Dead. Upon death, your Ba and Ka would reunite, and this united spirit would be led before a tribunal of gods. Your heart, the seat of your memory, conscience, and morality, was placed on a giant golden scale, balanced against the feather of Mot, the goddess of truth and cosmic order. If your heart was heavy with the weight of lies, selfishness, or wrongdoing, it would sink. The monstrous beast Ammit, part lion, part hippo, and part crocodile, waited nearby, ready to devour the unbalanced heart, condemning you to a second, permanent death and the annihilation of your soul. But if your heart was as light as the feather, you were judged true of voice, and your akh could pass into the glorious, eternal afterlife. This was the fate every Egyptian feared and prepared for their entire lives. So when a person dreamed of their own judgment, perhaps seeing a scale or the daunting figure of Osiris, the lord of the underworld, it was not a simple nightmare. It was a direct communication from the divine realm, a stark warning, or a vital preparation. A dream of a heavy, burdensome heart could signal that your actions in the waking world were putting your eternal soul in jeopardy. It was a call to live more righteously, to correct your path before the real judgment day arrived. Conversely, a dream of successfully passing the test, of your heart balancing perfectly with the feather, was the ultimate reassurance. It was a divine promise that you were living in harmony with Ma'at and that your soul was on the correct trajectory for immortality. These judgment dreams turned the abstract theology of the afterlife into a personal, urgent reality, giving the dreamer a chance to change their fate while there was still time. This sacred science of the night did not remain locked within Egypt's borders. Its powerful ideas drifted across the Mediterranean, carried by traders and travelers, slowly weaving themselves into the very fabric of Greek and Roman thought. The Greeks, in particular, were captivated by Egypt's ancient wisdom, and its dream lore was no exception. They saw in the Egyptian system a sophisticated, time-tested method for understanding the divine, and they eagerly adopted and adapted its core principles. The most visible sign of this cultural fusion was the god Serapis, a deity deliberately created to bridge the gap between Egyptian and Greek beliefs. He combined the traits of the Egyptian Osiris and Apis bull with the familiar appearance and attributes of the Greek gods Zeus and Asclepius. Serapis became a major god of healing and dreams in the Hellenistic world, and his temples, called Serapeums, functioned exactly like the Egyptian incubation sanctuaries. A sick Greek pilgrim would now travel to a Serapeum, perform purifying rituals, and sleep in its sacred halls, hoping the Greco-Egyptian god would visit him with a cure, just as Serapis had done for Egyptians for centuries. This was not a simple borrowing, it was a profound syncretism, a blending of two spiritual worlds into a new, powerful whole. The Greek god of medicine, Asclepius, also began to take on the characteristics of his Egyptian predecessors. His healing sanctuaries, like the famous one at Epidaurus, became centers for dream incubation that would have felt instantly familiar to an Egyptian priest. Patients would sleep in the abaton, the holy dormitory, and report their dreams to temple priests who acted as interpreters and physicians. The recorded cures are strikingly similar to the Egyptian accounts, with the god appearing in a dream to perform a symbolic surgery or prescribe a specific remedy. The Roman Empire, which absorbed so much of Greek culture, inherited this dream tradition in turn. They built their own Asclepia and continued the practice of incubation, firmly believing in the diagnostic power of dreams. The great Roman physician Galen, whose medical theories dominated Europe for over 1,000 years, openly credited dreams with guiding some of his most important diagnoses, a direct intellectual descendant of the Egyptian masters of the secret things. So the next time you hear of a Greek seeking a vision of Asclepius or a Roman general dedicating a temple after a prophetic dream, you are witnessing the enduring echo of an Egyptian belief, a testament to the power of their bizarre dream records to shape the world far beyond the Nile. Far to the south, in the kingdom of Kush, another pharaoh received a dream that would launch an army. Tanwit-Amani, a Kushite ruler, slept within the holy temple of Ammon at Jebel Barkal, a place considered the southern home of the powerful god. In his vision, two giant serpents appeared before him, one on his right and one on his left. When he awoke, he was confused by the potent imagery and sought the wisdom of his own priests. Their interpretation was immediate and electrifying. They declared that the two serpents represented the double crown of Egypt itself, the Pishent, which combined the white crown of Upper Egypt and the red crown of Lower Egypt. The dream was a promise from Ammon that Tanwit-Amani was destined to reunify and rule the entire land of Egypt. reclaiming the throne for the Kushite dynasty. Empowered by this divine mandate, he mobilized his forces and marched north. The historical records, specifically a stone slab known as the Dream Stela of Tanwit-Amani, tell us that his campaign was initially a stunning success. He claimed to have recaptured Memphis, the ancient capital, and received the submission of numerous northern princes. This stela was his public monument, carved to broadcast the dream far and wide, proving that his right to rule was not born of mere ambition, but was a destiny delivered directly by a god in his sleep. Yet history often complicates divine prophecy. While his early victories were real, his triumph was short-lived. The powerful Assyrian Empire, backing rival factions in Egypt, swiftly counterattacked. Tanwit-Amani's forces were overwhelmed, and he was driven back to his Kushite homeland, never to rule Egypt again. So was the dream a false prophecy? In the Egyptian worldview, absolutely not. The dream was a genuine message, a true revelation of divine favor at that moment. Its failure to manifest in lasting victory was not a refutation of the dream's power, but a testament to a greater, more complex truth. The gods could grant an opportunity, but the chaotic tides of human conflict and the will of other gods could still turn the tide. Tanwit-Amani's stela remains a powerful document, not of a lie, but of a moment when a king's destiny was crystallized in a vision of two serpents, a moment where faith in a dream fueled a bold attempt to reshape history. Two worlds separated by thousands of years, both obsessed with the same mysterious phenomenon. The ancient Egyptian priest and the modern psychoanalyst would sit in the same room with a patient describing a bizarre dream, but their conclusions would be a universe apart. Both are master interpreters of symbols, yet they are searching for the source of the message in two entirely different places. For the Egyptian, the dream was an external broadcast, a dispatch from the gods received by the wandering soul. For pioneers like Sigmund Freud and Carl Jung, the dream was an internal broadcast, a message from the hidden depths of the dreamer's own mind. Freud, in his seminal work The Interpretation of Dreams, argued that dreams are the royal road to the unconscious. He saw them as wish fulfillments, often of a sexual nature, and as the mind's way of processing repressed desires and childhood traumas that the conscious self could not handle. The bizarre imagery was a form of censorship, disguising the true, unsettling content. In this view, a dream of a crocodile, which an Egyptian would see as a warning of betrayal from officials, might be interpreted by a Freudian as a symbol for a threatening paternal figure or a repressed aggressive impulse. The source of the dream was not a god, but the dreamer's own personal history and hidden urges. Then came Carl Jung, Freud's student who broke away to form his own theories. Jung agreed that dreams were a window into the unconscious, but he proposed a much larger, more collective kind of unconscious. He believed that all humanity shares a deep, inherited reservoir of universal symbols and archetypes, which he called the collective unconscious. These are not personal memories, but primordial images common to all cultures: the wise old man, the great mother, the shadow self. A Jungian analyst might see the Egyptian dream of the weighing of the heart not as a literal prophecy, but as a perfect expression of the universal archetype of judgment and the individuation process, the journey toward becoming a whole self. The scales, the feather, the monstrous amet, these are not external gods, but internal symbols of the psyche's own moral reckoning. So where the Egyptian and the modern psychologist find common ground is in the absolute belief that dreams are a language. They both created elaborate dictionaries to translate that language. The Chester Beatty Papyrus and Freud's dream symbolism charts serve the same practical purpose: to decode the confusing into the comprehensible. Both systems understand that a simple image, like a tooth falling out, carries a weight far beyond its literal meaning. The fundamental schism is the location of the broadcasting station. Is it a divine realm Or is it the intricate neural landscape of the self? The Egyptian answer placed the dreamer within a cosmic conversation, a small part of a grand, spiritual order. The modern psychological answer placed the cosmos within the dreamer, making the self the center of its own vast, mysterious universe. One looked outward to the gods for meaning, the other inward to the soul, and in that fundamental shift, the entire nature of the dream was redefined. These bizarre dream interpretations were not just abstract ideas, they were meticulously recorded on physical objects that have survived for thousands of years. The most famous of these is the Chester Beatty Papyrus III, a scroll that acts as our primary window into this lost science. Discovered in the village of Deir el-Medina, this papyrus is a practical manual, its two neat columns translating visions into fates. But it was not alone. Scattered across Egypt, archaeologists have found smaller, more personal records written on ostraka, which are broken pieces of pottery or limestone flakes. These were the notepads of the ancient world, affordable and readily available. On these shards, we find the raw data of dreams, written by the dreamers themselves or by local scribes. A farmer might scratch out a brief account of his nightmare about a dead ox, perhaps before taking it to the village priest for an official interpretation. These ostraka are the unfiltered voices of common people, their private anxieties preserved on broken pottery for millennia. Beyond these personal notes, the walls of tombs and temples carry the dreams of the elite, carved in stone for eternity. High officials and nobles often included autobiographical texts in their tombs, and sometimes these narratives featured pivotal dreams that justified their careers or confirmed their divine favor. While we do not have a full royal dream book from a pharaoh's library, these inscriptions show that the practice of recording and heeding significant dreams was embedded at the highest levels of society. Imagine a nobleman having a portentous dream that a god promised him success in an upcoming expedition. He would return and have that story carved into the wall of his tomb, a permanent public record proving that his life's achievements were preordained by the gods. This was not boasting, it was a spiritual resume. The combination of these sources, the formal papyrus manual, the casual ostraka notes, and the monumental tomb inscriptions, creates a powerful triangulation of evidence. They prove that from the pharaoh in his palace to the laborer in his mud-brick home, the interpretation of dreams was a normal, essential, and documented part of daily life, a thread connecting the entire civilization through the shared language of the night. Yet this entire system of dream interpretation rests on a foundation we can never fully verify: the accuracy of the translations themselves. Modern Egyptologists fiercely debate the true meaning of key symbols in the dream books. The ancient Egyptian language is rich with puns and double meanings that are almost impossible to capture perfectly. A single word might have one primary meaning, but a host of symbolic associations that are lost on us today. For instance, the symbol often translated as a crocodile could, in a different context, refer to a specific type of official or a concept of lurking danger, completely changing the interpretation of a dream. Without a living master of the secret things to explain the nuances, we are left with educated guesses, trying to reconstruct a complex code with only fragments of the key. This opens the door to a more profound controversy: the possibility of political manipulation. When a pharaoh like Thutmose IV erects a stela claiming a divine dream granted him the throne, are we reading a genuine spiritual experience or a brilliantly crafted piece of royal propaganda? In a society where divine will was the ultimate source of legitimacy, inventing a favorable dream was the perfect tool to justify a shaky claim to power. A court priest, a master of the secret things loyal to the new king, could easily announce that he had interpreted a divine vision, one that conveniently endorsed the ruler's authority. The recorded dream then becomes not a personal revelation, but a public decree from the gods themselves, silencing dissent and consolidating power. This forces us to ask a difficult question about every royal dream we encounter. Where does sincere belief end and calculated storytelling begin? The challenge extends to the very nature of these ancient texts. Were the Egyptians recording these dreams as literal, factual events that happened to the soul? Or were they using the language of dreams as a powerful metaphorical framework, a culturally accepted way to discuss fate, psychology, and social order? A dream about a god leaving a temple, like the one attributed to Nectanebo II, works perfectly as a metaphor for the collapse of national morale and divine favor. It is a poignant story that explains a complex historical tragedy in a way everyone could understand, so when we read these bizarre records, we are navigating a labyrinth of faith, politics, and poetry. We must constantly weigh the literal against the symbolic, the personal spiritual experience against the public political tool, forever wondering how much of the message came from the gods and how much was shaped by the hands of men. For all the dream books we have recovered, there are ghost texts we know existed but have vanished completely. Ancient inscriptions mention other manuals, grander and more detailed than the Chester Beatty Papyrus, written for the pharaohs themselves and housed in the great library of the Temple of Ammon. These royal dream books are lost, their secrets perhaps disintegrated into dust or still buried deep beneath the sand. Their absence is a constant reminder that we are only hearing half of a conversation, trying to understand a complex language with a fragment of the dictionary. This leaves us with a collection of unexplained visions permanently carved into stone, dreams that defy our modern attempts at interpretation. One stellar records a nobleman's dream of a tree that spoke to him, its voice like the rustling of papyrus, delivering a message he never fully reveals. Another describes a woman who saw the moon turn to blood and drip into the Nile, a vision so vivid she had it recorded at her tomb, yet its meaning remains utterly opaque to us. Was it a prophecy of a poor inundation, a personal tragedy, or a cosmic sign? Without the lost dream books to consult, we can only guess. Perhaps the most haunting are the dreams where the gods are silent. Some records speak of dreamers entering vast, empty halls in the underworld, places where no deity greeted them and no message was given. Were these dreams of divine abandonment, or simply nightmares of a soul lost on its journey? These enigmatic records are the ultimate puzzle, the unsolved cases of ancient wonderomancy. They whisper across the centuries, reminding us that for all we have decoded, some doors to the Egyptian mind remain firmly locked, their keys missing, waiting for the sands to shift one more time. These ancient dream records offer us a breathtaking window into a civilization that listened intently to the whispers of the night. They reveal a people profoundly engaged in a dialogue between the waking world and the subconscious, viewing every strange vision as a vital thread connecting them to the gods and the future. For the Egyptians, dreams were not fleeting illusions but a sacred technology for navigating life's greatest challenges, from personal health to the fate of nations. This intricate system of belief, preserved on papyrus and stone, shows a humanity not so different from our own, grappling with fear, hope, and the timeless desire to know what lies ahead. The next time your own mind conjures a bizarre scene in the deep of night, consider the possibility that you are part of a tradition stretching back thousands of years, a shared human impulse to find meaning in the dark. What do you think your dreams are truly about? Share your most intriguing dreams and thoughts on these ancient mysteries in the comments below.